today's event is part of the School of Abducted Europe program. I'm very happy to introduce our today's guest, Joulia Strauss from Berlin, who is an artist and a co-founder of the free access independent educational project Avtonomi Akadimia. I'm also very happy for this opportunity to present this project here, since the idea of it corresponds to a huge extent to what we are trying to do here at the School of Kyiv. And so I will give the floor to our guest. Maybe she will introduce herself more broadly.
Thank you so much. And I will give the floor to the screen because we live in the times when on the top of the tree of knowledge is no longer the word, but let's say specifically organization. Organization in Greece was something that has been synchronous with all the other protest movements that started around, vaguely speaking, from 2010 to 2000 and continued until, vaguely speaking, 2013. And so you know, of course, that on Syntagma Square there were a lot of discussions about alternative society and about the possible constituting a possible future, and a lot of alternative structures have emerged. But at some point, for some reason, all this power has been invested into the political party of Syriza. So the responsibility of numerous groups which occurred on Syntagma Square has been redirected, and the political party has become a responsible entity again for a change in the society. That's why these initiatives didn't continue to exist for a long time. So these alternative structures have dispersed. Some of them have been closed in the processes. Some of them, because they were all grassroots initiatives, didn't survive because they were based on no resources, and so they couldn't continue for a long time. So this is, of course, a big generalization, but it's making the climate in which Avtonomi Akadimia has started its existence in last summer. It's the initiative that arises from different elements of my experience with alternative universities and with self-organized schools, or with the activities within the institutional bodies of the universities, but that abuse the autonomy that universities still have nowadays for creating some, in fact, alternative forms of education. But I will tell you more. For example, these are the figures that Avtonomi Akadimia feels in solidarity with. This is Aaron Swartz, who is known for making 4.5 to 5 millions of scientific publications available open online, and has been accused of hello, Aaron Swartz, one of the figures that are inspiring for Avtonomi Akadimia activities. The knowledge has to be free. 4.5 millions, 5 millions of scientific publications free available online means 55 years in prison. So this sentence has been given to him because of he has provided these scientific publications free, although they actually have to be free according to their own, to the own constitutions of the universities, such as MIT, where he was working. This is Julian Assange, he cannot participate in the Avtonomi Akadimia so largely because he is in the Ecuadorian embassy, as you know, but members of the university's faculty, such as, for example, Brigitta Jones-Dottir, who is also a member of the Icelandic parliament, she is representing the role of WikiLeaks, and she's also been very active in publishing the famous collateral video which Bradley Manning leaked. This is Peter Weibel. He is one of the members of the faculty also, because since many years he embodies the unity of knowledge we also practice with his Center for Arts and Media in Karlsruhe. This university is a form of protest, and this form of protest is maybe not very loud, but it's long-term protest, and it's very continuous, and that is what was missing in Athens when I moved there. Some initiatives that exist for a long time, that have their own stability, rhythm, and reliability. And this is an illustration of a quote of Friedrich Kittler, who has passed away 3 years ago. And this quote has not yet been published. And it's a very media historical quote saying that the true revolutions, they come on the pigeon feet. They are revolutions of the media. The pigeon feet are very quiet, as you understand. So it's a paraphrasing of Nietzsche's quote about the thoughts that are coming on pigeon's feet and ruling the world. This is Nikos Romanos, another inspirational figure in the coordinate system of Avtonomi Akadimia. Nikos has been the only witness of the murder of Alexandros Grigoropoulos in 2008, when the policeman has just shot the teenager Alexandros for no reason. And Nikos, who has seen this, has grown up and became a leader of anarchist thinking. And he has tried to rob the bank, and he has been very friendly to all the people who worked in the bank, and the group was immediately arrested, and he's been imprisoned for 15 years for an attempt to rob the bank without having even reached the age of 20. And so now he's in the prison. But what does he do with the Avtonomi Akadimia? It's about education. So being in the prison, he has managed to get accepted in the university. And so he passed all the exams, and officially, according to their laws, he is supposed to study in the university some hours a day and then go back to the prison, which of course has not been followed by the state. And the state has started a campaign of criminalization of the anarchists, and the campaign that turns the beta cells, which are the group cells where all the people can read and collaborate, to gamma cells, which are the isolation cells. So Nikos has started a long protest, 33 days of hunger strike, which is not a unique situation. Greek anarchists permanently are on hunger strike, and it's a rotation principle, so he was on hunger strike in order to get back his right. It was an absurd situation when an anarchist has protested for the right that is given by the law of the state. And I think this represents very well the situation in Athens, where different ideologies reach each other's hands. I mean, particular ideologies of the spectrum, starting from violent anarchists to the left party. This, and Nikos Romanos, I'm sorry, he has won the struggle, and we have helped him. And his father is the next lecturer at the Avtonomi Akadimia in October. And this is Kritika Politична, the global activism issue. It is related with our practices, and our practice of the university continues the issues that happened in this issue, which is the research about the architecture of the global revolution and finding the connecting points between different movements and trying to understand what is the new and specific, irreducible new quality of our all revolution, the first time when the movements are connecting, exchanging tactics. We also transform cultural institutions. Not only we organize them, but also we transform the existing ones. And this is a cover of another critica polityczna, which is called Instytucja Krytyczna. This is the Center for Contemporary Art Zamek Ujazdowski in Warsaw after having been transformed by the Cultural Revolution in the nearest future. This is our practices in Berlin during the occupied Berlin Biennale 7, occupation of the Pergamon Museum. I faked around 50 fake IDs of the university and of Autonomous University, and sent a request, and we were invited to visit the museum. We all came for free, and this is what we were doing. We were protesting against the monument, which is a monument to resistance. Maybe you know the book of Peter Weiss, The Aesthetics of the Resistance. It is this Pergamon altar, and we've been protesting against this colonization of culture because it was also a stolen monument. Now you can see here you can see Andrew Ross. He's another professor of Avtonomi Akadimia here. We have been occupying the Guggenheim Museum in Venice because the Gulf Labor Group, who I collaborate with because part of it are the occupied museums, has been doing research about the working conditions of the construction work of Guggenheim Museum in Abu Dhabi, and this is something they never call slavery, but the workers are subjected to torturous circumstances, deprived their papers. So Andrew, another protagonist. So I decided to do it in Athens because I was coming back to Athens many times since the riots have started, and I have been there for the first time during the Athens Biennale. And this boy was exemplified the new form of protest that has started there in the time around 2008, which is different politics of visibility that the protesters have started to use. Maybe you remember the burning Christmas tree in Athens, which is a protest against the capitalistic consumeristic society. It was very early form of this conscious, radically democratized production of images and a new turn in the image war. And this is Pavlos Fissas, who has been killed by Nazis in 2 years ago. And I've been there at the funeral, and somehow, you know, on the one hand, the protests have made sense to me somehow in Athens. I mean, all these circumstances somehow drawn me there, but most of all it was criticism of Christos Giovanopoulos, the guy who has initiated the big network called Solidarity for All in Athens. And after Daniel Mutzel and me, who have published the Critica Politična Global Activism, been interviewing him, he was criticizing us for postponing our tasks by being interested too much in the global activism and being interested in everything. So this critique I took seriously, and that's why I actually came to Athens, you know, because the tasks that Europe had until now, Europe has now a very strong task, which is Ukraine. But for me, before Ukraine started, I was always thinking of going to Athens exactly because this is a European task that Europe permanently continues to oversee, to pretend that it doesn't exist, and you know, continues to impose its sadistic behavior to the periphery, the way it actually still does, and the way it does actually to Ukraine as well. And so anyway, this is Daniel Mutzel. He's one of the faculty members also, and he was talking about the innovative deportation methods that are being made now in Germany. This is Napoli Paul Langer, one of the protagonists of the refugee movement. I mean, the political refugee movement, which has been happening through the last 3 years in Berlin. She climbed on a tree and stayed there for 1 week, and this is the result of these artistic practices. so Daniel, I don't remember exactly, I don't remember how many times the faculty members come back during the documentations, so I better tell you what he was doing. He gave this the lecture that was very complicated to gather material on, because it was about the methods that German authorities now use for deportation of the refugees. It's, you know, the citizens, refugees of unclear citizenship, they are sent to foreign embassies in order to identify their citizenship and in order to get deported after this identification. So the embassy staff is granted for identifying the refugees as belonging to this country or other country. There is a phenomenon of Nigerization of the refugees in Germany, because there is a special deal with Nigerian embassy of a very, very easy, comfortable deportation for those refugees who have been identified as Nigerian. And can you imagine? The method of the identification of the refugees as Nigerian in Germany now is the measurement of their skull. So now in 2015, this is officially, you know, anthropological method is officially introduced by the German authorities in order to achieve the goal of identification of somebody as belonging to some kind of cultural, ethnological group, right? So we're talking about the methods of determination of person's identity which are openly racist. And also, Germany gives financial incentives to the embassies to collaborate and issue the travel certificates to the refugees without papers. So it's been very difficult for Daniel to do this research. He was doing it for something like 1 year. So he gave the very first lecture at Avtonomi Akadimia in the summer in Athens. And he was reporting on the successful methods that refugee movement has been applying and achievements. And he's been also reporting on, you know, revealing the fact that actually not much of change has happened, although all the authorities in Germany are now presenting themselves as extremely friendly to the refugees. This is Peter Berz. He has studied with Friedrich Kittler, and he continues the media theory towards the direction of the Berlin biological media theory, and he continues to do it in the garden. By the way, the garden of Academia Platonos is just a public space. So it's been visited by inhabitants of the area, which is very conservative and well, conservative, you know. It's one of the areas in Athens that are subjected to permanent brainwash in this direction. The problems you have is because of refugees and so on. So it's second bad area in Athens. So doing it there, it has a certain dimension. But also it's a public space which is quite big. And it was Academia, it was a name of this garden which existed for a while up to the moment when it has been suddenly renamed by Plato's name, just because Plato was teaching there. So we come there and do Academia without Plato. So Avtonomi Akademia means not only autonomy by itself, but also autonomy means autonomous from Plato. This is Georgia Kotretsos, one of Athenian artists who are also researchers, and this is, you know, it's not so nice to create these categorizations, but she is on this, she is a protagonist of the Athens art scene, who is situated exactly on the borders between art and science. This is Tatiana Volkova. She has been talking about the activist art in the Russian so-called Federation. This is Moritz Matean. He's been giving lectures, practical lectures on 3D environments. This is Tanya Ron. She is a lecturer who comes now for the second time during the same time period, and she is doing something that is connecting philosophy and the world. She's talking about two texts by Friedrich Kittler this season, and at the same time she's giving acrobatic lessons. Because the texts are about weightlessness and about media and the drugs, and about the preparing of the arrival of the gods. And as you've noticed, it's one of the important elements of the academia is the media theory, and we do a long-term research on the emergence. It's very criminological research on the emergence of different writing systems and the relations of these writing systems with the gods around the Mediterranean basin, including Arabic writing, Semitic writing, cuneiform, what is it called, hieroglyphs, ancient Greek alphabet, and the computers and their relation to the media of today. This is George Kafensis. He gave a talk on defending Plato. He said that in the Plato's Republic there is a tendency where Plato, being an aristocratic darling of conservative thinkers, actually defends debt payment, and that it is not surprising, since indebtedness leading to debt slavery was the source of civil wars and revolutions throughout ancient Greek history from 600 BC on. I was hoping that he would tell us more about the relation of Plato's Republic and today's protest against indebtedness. This is Julia Mermika. She is part of the initiative which is called Botanikos Kypos Squad. She gave an amazing workshop which was called Ethico-Aesthetic Paradigm Against the Fascistization of Society, and we will see an excerpt from it later on. This is mathematician Mark Robin Wendt. He will also speak himself in a video. This is Matthias Hoffmann. He organizes a school in Berlin by himself, and he also just completed a book on alternative systems of education. This is Reimer Stange. During the occupation times, during times of the Occupy movement, he has been writing about the new form of art. He also was writing about the process that has started to happen, that there are a lot of people who are making art who don't give a shit about the art world and how it is perceived, but who also don't care about autonomy, but who are just interested in contributing to the society in general. This is Luca Di Blasi. He has written a very provocative book in Berlin. He teaches at the university in Bern, and the book was called The White Man, and everybody has immediately read it because it sounded like a white man. Luca feels himself oppressed by the dictatorship of minorities. But those who read the book were surprised because he is very knowledgeable about the problems and controversies and aporias of the minorities. And the conclusion of the book is that white heterosexual male in Europe cannot see himself as a minority. and he was giving a lecture about Plato from the perspective of today's Heidegger's black books. 2 years ago, Peter Travny has published the remaining black books by Martin Heidegger, who has been largely re-established within the German academia. And it has been discovered that he has been extremely openly anti-Semitic, and just that he, you know, ended as a rector of a university not by coincidence during, you know, the time of National Socialism, that he fully shared the position, and that he also has written something that can be seen as an early conspiracy theory, because he claims that the Jewish nation is responsible for the desertification. So through this prism, Luca has analyzed Plato's work, especially the Kyiv, from the view of the theory of conspiracy. And actually in the Academia Platonos we are facing and confronting and discussing the issue that philosophy itself is a deeply elitist discipline, and that it doesn't exist in parts of the world where people need something much more basic than can dedicate itself to philosophy. So it's a very difficult process, because many of the academics are still based on Occidental philosophical schools, and so, but still this is exactly what we are doing there. It's a world without nations, the world without the disciplines between different sciences, and the world that has been, before Plato has formed the first concept of the state in Politeia, which is a national state. And so Europe, without any base, what would it be? A Europe that has no conservative elitist base, Plato and Aristotle. What is the alternative identification for the entire Europe today? I mean, we are not talking about the monetary model of the world, which is definitely coming to its end. This is Sotirios Bachtzets is a friend of mine, one of people for whom actually I decided to do it, because he is an excellent academic. He has finished his art historian PhD with summa cum laude. And what is the crisis in Athens? The crisis is a situation when the real life of the real people, for instance of academics, is comparable to abyss. He teaches in 3 different universities, and all 3 universities require confirmation from each other university that his engagement with that university will not harm his activity at this university, which factually means that a person has to become as productive as 3 people can be. So anyway, he gave a lecture on semiopower, and this is his main point. The main point is that beyond both the corporate market structure and the capitalist state apparatus within current neoliberal era, these terms became effectively almost synonymous. What kind of alternative politics can bring to the fore also an alternative type of distributing semiopower? That is his question. So how can you counter this machine that reaches out to the very micro level of our bodies? how you turn it around. I mean, we gather in the Academia Platonos in the garden just to experience bare coexistence. We meet every time and start our lectures only 1 hour, at least 1 hour after the actual announced time. We do it with a collective such as Arbit City Group, for example. This is James Simburas, an initiator of a huge artists' union. How can artists be part of a union in general? That might be the question at all. And in this case, 90 artists, how can 90 artists unite themselves? So it's self-organized artists union, which is a new form, new type of collectivity of the artists in Athens. And I'm not glorifying this activity. I mean, it emerges out of necessity, but this is what's going on there. It's called Contemporary Art Showcase Athens. And this is documentation of Ania Domanska. Interesting to see it from perspective of the others. So we just coexist and we organize it and we do it in the middle of other events in Athens. This is what the garden looks like. It's huge and it has very different geographical constellations. And it's very far. It's really difficult to reach it because it's the district which is not very central. So I'm very thankful that everybody comes to it, to the lectures, to this totally remote point. And there are a lot of people who are involved on the basis of actually visiting it on a regular basis. They are also from different universities, institutions. This is Olesia Turkina presenting her book called Space Dogs, in the position of a dog. These are works of Christoph Keller. He has been doing amazing research, for example, in Amazonas forest. And his lecture was called Anarchaeology. We were projecting without electricity and where we wanted, so we never asked for any permissions, obviously. He reveals all the scientific methods of archaeology as, of course, colonial. This is what happens in the garden. It's, there are something like 7 different NGOs around the neighborhood, and they somehow protect the garden from, I don't know, something what could otherwise happen to it in the area. This is a celebration of rainbow families. This is the studio of Pokayo. Now here we're talking about artist as organizer, which is a new type of an artist who occurred with the necessities of intervening into the power structures of the art world. I think it's empowered by the movements around 2011 that artists have started to organize things themselves, create alternative art worlds, not be complicit with the idea of abusement of art for the extension of the global market forces and redefining its role in society. So Poca has organized the Biennial. He's initiated Biennale in Athens, and it took many different forms, but this one is called Omonia. It will be on Omonia Square. So the main point is that it is on a square. So as you see, there is a big influence, and of course it will be a lot of fights about how can the movements collaborate with a biennale, of course, but now here we're sitting in the middle of a biennale which sees itself as a continuation of Maidan, and in Athens we are trying to make sure as much as possible that this biennale as an open structure is transformed towards the needs of today, and that in this situation art does its work in order to belong to the techniques of survival in the 21st century. This is just Raimar Stanger, one of the lecturers in the Vox. Vox is a squad, which is maybe known to you people. Here, of course, I couldn't not mention the self-organized hospitals in Greece, because it's a phenomenon that there are so many and they are so different. For example, this one, as you can see, points that it's also a political hospital, right? So the main political conviction of its participants is that solidarity is being rather reciprocally provided than egoistically or philanthropically, given the fact that we are all potential migrants, homeless, unemployed. So you can see the spirit of self-organization that has not just decided to fill the gap of something that is missing and not provided by the state, but that changes the entire health system. It's just an example of how the lecturers visit Athens and what they do there. It's Daniel. This is Tanya Rond. We collaborate with at least 9 different places, and this is a lecture in a theater. So this is our school, the School of Athens. This is these are the pre-Socratics: Anaximander, Empedocles, Pythagoras, Philolaus, Archytas. No, Archytas is one of the pre-Socratic philosophers who was talking about the so-called logismos, which is a calculated path or way, when the rich give to the poor, and vice versa, because due to mathematical calculations, a model of financial equality has been reached, and everybody trusts each other because they are based on this calculated logismos, which is, of course, utopic vision, but at least there were models that were proposed and that even existed. For example, Aristoxenos was also a specialist of ancient Greek music, and he lived in Tarent, in a small island. So the education itself has to be transformed in many different ways. Now, for example, this gymnastes, which is the root of the word gymnasion, it just means nudists. So a gymnasium, which is known to us as an educational institution, originally was a place where boys and girls were together. Some atmospheric report without any text. So it's self-organized, which means that there is no abuse of work of any volunteers, and that unfortunately I have to do most of it myself. But fortunately, all people who visited to give lectures,
I was trying to think about, I guess,
they come for their own reasons, for their own solidarity with what happens in Greece, for their own curiosity, and many of them are in different universities, so I consider them all as members of a foundation of Avtonomi Akadimia, and for many of them we just find individual ways of funding how to bring them, be it even if I'm paying their own tickets. But it's grassroots and self-organized, and I'm wondering where it should develop in its next step. And after this summer, I was thinking that I have to do something in the direction of making sure somehow to crowdfund it or something, but then the next people started to come themselves and started to ask whether they could give some lectures, and now I'm just overloaded with work of actually organizing everything again, and so it somehow runs by itself, and I don't know where it develops, which is great because it was just an initial gesture to start it, and now something happens to it, I don't even know. Here there are some excerpts from lectures, and I hope that it's not just talking heads to you, that you can still think with them.
The line, the frequently tenuous line between morality and practicality. So to just take a very concrete example where, you know, someone, you know, in East Boston or whatever, is facing a lot of debt on their house, and the question of whether to try to pay back the banks, you know, they're facing foreclosure petition or something like that, and they think to themselves that the moral thing to do would be to not repay. But it seems to me that this is a situation where, in some sense, maybe this is a little bit dramatic, but this person basically has to decide to go to war in their own personal lives if they're not going to repay the debt, if they're going to decide not to repay the debt and lose their house. I mean, it's a revolution within a personal life to make that kind of decision. I'm not sure how now to get to a question, but it seems like there's, you know, this. I guess this issue of like all of the instances where morality crashes up against practical considerations of a life or of collective lives.
Well, sometimes when that crash happens, a revolution takes place in one's morality. Many, for example, there are many anti-debt movements in this period of history. And one of the most important aspects of these movements has been the transformation of not only a social transformation, but a personal transformation in terms of one's relationship to the powerful in their societies, and in relationship to the class relationship that begins to become clear about. So, for example, in Mexico in the 1990s, after the crash of the peso, a tremendous increase in the interest rates on people's homes, for example, which led to evictions and a tremendous amount of personal tensions. Something for small farmers who were losing their farms because of this change that occurs, but they had not been informed about such changes. But the consequences of the collapse of the peso led to the fact that mortgages and so on would often be 2, 3, or 4 times higher than they initially contracted for. They said to themselves, "This is immoral. What they're asking me to do in the name of morality is in fact much more immoral than not." In that revolution, because there's a revolution that takes place here, and a very dangerous one for the person who's involved, because it if you're alone, it could be a disaster. But if you have a political organization around you, which in Mexico in the 1990s, in the anti-Islam movement, there was a mass movement that was able to articulate, and through that articulation of this moral transformation, was able to change, in fact, the course of these defaulting politics. And so many times they...
But then he was not, he just he had some art ready.
Talking about the fascist machine is a war machine that takes war as its sole object. Have to say, πρέπει όμως να πω ότι καμιά φορά και οι αναρχικές και οι αντεξουσιαστικές μηχανές ή οι πολιτικές μηχανές μπορεί να παίρνουν τον πόλεμο σαν το μόνο τους αντικείμενο και να μην παράγουν και να μην δημιουργούν, να μην κάνουν αυτό που ο Καστοριάδης λέει, το πράττει και το ποιεί. Μπορεί να έχουν την ιδεολογία ως μόνο του σκοπό και τότε είναι αποτυχημένες πολεμικές μηχανές. Είναι μηχανές που μάλιστα τις εκμεταλλευτούν segmentarity of labor and functions that processes molecular flows of matter and energy, quantum flows, and can potentially give fascist determinations. In the forefront is to be alert about the fascist inside us that can be in our family, in our neighborhood, in our relationship, in our personal relationships, and in the social structure, where we about pure matter, politics of pure matter. Οπότε, μετά από όλα αυτά, it's about political physics, right? It's not about ideology. I have another. They say that even representations, that even ideologies are bodies, because they are social and desiring machines. They don't accept the term, like the Lacanian, Althusserian Marxism that says about ideology and representation. Και είπα στα αγγλικά ότι δεν δέχονται τον λακανικό μαρξισμό του Althusser που μιλάει για την ιδεολογία και τις αναπαραστάσεις. Ξεκινάνε από, γι' αυτό σας λέω, είναι political physics, πολιτική φυσική.
So she talks about this in very, very remote squat in suburbs. And in this neighborhood she is really educating people like nihilists did in deep Russia when Vera Figner would go with colleagues to found schools, and this squat is in a botanic garden, and this garden was planned to build according to some Danish model, and on the way of the construction work after some years they realized that the climatic conditions in Greece are different than in Denmark, and that's why this garden can't work out. So that's why it was occupied. So this is the reality, the daily life in Greece.
Is this radiocarbon dating or radiocarbon method? Is this known? So explain. Okay, explain a little bit. This is actually it's chemistry, or it's a physical chemistry. It's developed mainly in the 1940s and 1950s by William Libby, who later he got a Nobel Prize for this. And it's using a circulation of carbon, natural circulation of carbon in the organic world. So in the air there is carbon dioxide, as we know today very well, and so and this carbon dioxide gets absorbed by plants, and that's for carbon of the carbon dioxide goes into the food chain by plants. So the plants are eaten by animals, and so the animals take the carbon inside, and then afterwards they rot, and the carbon goes back, and they burn or whatever they happen to them, so it goes back to the atmosphere again. And so by cosmic radiation, there's in the atmosphere there's nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon dioxide. That's the main parts of the atmosphere. So by cosmic radiation, nitrogen gets transformed to carbon. So actually, I don't want to explain how it works, but it works like this. So cosmic radiation is very heavy, so the nitrogen in the air gets changed to carbon. It oxidizes with the oxygen in the air, so we have carbon dioxide, and so it goes into the food chain. Actually, this changed carbon from the cosmic radiation is an isotope of carbon. So it's not, and that's why it's sometimes called the carbon, the radiocarbon method, radiocarbon, it says already. So the carbon which is changed from the nitrogen is actually radioactive. So this is actually the main idea which had William Levy. So, oh fine, we have radioactive carbon dioxide which goes into the food chain and is not exchanged anymore once the organism dies. So as long as the organism lives, there's always an exchange of this carbon because you eat, so and the plants, so they take carbon dioxide and give it up in the atmosphere again. So we, as human animals, so we exhale carbon dioxide. So as long as we live, we always exchange carbon dioxide and carbon. So it means as long as as animals or organisms live, so the concentration of the radioactive carbon is the same as in the atmosphere. But once the organism dies, it starts the decay of this radioactive carbon. So, and if you are able to measure the decay of this radioactive carbon, then you can just, actually, this was the original idea, calculate how old is the organism when it died. This was the actual idea. So, okay, I don't want to expand this history of radiocarbon method because actually this calculation turned out not to work very well. But what I want to go to is to measure this radioactivity of whatever probes you take from organism, from dead organism. You have to measure them, and so the amount of radioactivity is so small. It's actually smaller than the background radiation, which just happens to us every time here. So it's very hard to measure. So it took them a long time to have Geiger counter, which can measure this very, very small radiation. Actually, it needed a special setup of counters. So finally, you measure the background radiation and the radiation of the probe you want to test, and then you just do some calculations. But because this amount is so small, so one measurement took something like 3-4 months. So you can imagine you have a probe, you put it in, you counter, and then after 4 months you come back and watch really there's a counter. So there was really, say 1, 2, 3 counts the decay of the radiation. So after 4 months you come back and you will see how much it counted. But still you have a big error on this measurement. So what you have to do is you have to measure it again and again. And so you have something like 3-4 measurements of the same probe to get a proper result. So it means to...
I don't know, maybe it's too long. Because he deconstructs the entire function
So
of
let's
the
open the
nature
next
of
door.
science.
So let's have a look on what is statistics. So what do they do?
Yeah,
Had a
exactly.
problem
Yes,
on
yeah.
this foundation, which is the so-called application problem, which is epistemological problem, and finally philosophical problem, that whatever is in the axioms, there is no provable relation to reality. So we're back to our stones here. So whatever, we can measure the stones, we can put a lot of physical examinations, chemical examinations on the stone, but finally, as we try to apply this mathematics axioms, these axioms just happen in our minds. They're just knowledge. They're in kind of virtual, as we say today. There is no proof that this theory is not just reflection of our own organization, own structure, own social background, whatever. So that the theory is really connected to what we happen here to as reality. So that's the application problem. Is what really happened. But this is still an assumption. We cannot sense. We don't even know what happens in the past, or if there is even a past. We don't know. Our present awareness is 5 seconds. So after 5 seconds, everything is past. So
the entire foundations of our universities, all the entire sciences, including mathematics, are simply just assumptions, and there is no proof. So when we meet in the garden, everybody meets in their own time zone, and when we start our lectures 1 hour too late, it becomes less of a problem. So philosophers come back, and first they are angry that the lectures start 1 hour later than they were thinking, and then they come to Germany, and in large meetings and huge conferences they report on this experience of Avtonomi Akadimia, saying that exactly these spaces are missing, this is the freedom of thinking, and this is exactly only can happen because the lectures start 1 hour too late or something like this. So we're just experimenting. So I just realized that this documentation actually corresponds to what he just said, that it doesn't represent what was actually happening, because it was already happening 2 months ago. And so the last day of the series in summer, it was actually the day of Ohi. So we went to the Syntagma Square and celebrated the populistic celebration of Ohi, which was betrayed on the next day. Just wondering. Suburbs.
I'll buy you a walk.
Yes, this was Athens at the day of Ohi, before the before everybody woke up and realized that that Syriza is actually not a left party with some leftist ideas, but just another mechanism of absorbing of the revolutionary potential, and now we are all back to work and organizing. That's all. So please come and let's collaborate. It's open. We can, you can criticize it by contributing something to it, and Athens is now on the map of contemporary art, and as you know, Documenta apparatus is already arriving there, so it's becoming very exciting how, you know, it's like Avatar. It's small groups of people who somehow agreed that yes, it's okay also to do some strange jobs in the bars, but still we accept that we are still artists, you know. Now the Anglo-Saxon machine comes again and says that the artists are only those who are represented in 5 American galleries and so on. So this has now changed very fine and very fragile relations within the art scene, but it's also very challenging because this provides also a lot of release, the release of energy and a lot of initiatives that are happening in Athens, and it has negative but also very positive dynamite sides. Dynamizing. Dynamization of
human experience.
And now, how long shall I continue?
Maybe someone has some questions to Julia.
Does anybody have any questions about Academia?
If not, maybe we could move to our main presentation space, because Julia is going to deliver her lecture performance there, and maybe afterwards someone will have questions. So I invite you to our central forum.
But before we went to the central forum, I would like to show you very, very, very briefly what you will hear. These are the ancient Greek hymns, which are, according to the last contribution, you cannot say that they are 2,600 years, and even if they would be measured with the radiocarbon method, you could not tell how old they are. But currently the state of science is that they are 2,600 years old, so they are archaic hymns. You can see above the letters, additional letters. They are the ancient Greek music notation. And it's a wonderful, exciting mathematical structure, the construction of ancient Greek music system out of tetrachords, which corresponds with the temporal music, which has chased out the main characteristics of this ancient Greek music by tempering the tune towards the octaves that are naturally not any longer corresponding with the frequencies. It's the different modes of ancient Greek music provided a multifaceted and very rich system of possibilities to, for example, to compose ancient Greek hymns in all these tunes. This is what this structure looks like, and these bridges between different tunes, they are the common notes, the notes of modulation. Modulation is something that has happened within the same musical composition. Here you can see 4 different tunes turning into each other at a particular moment in time. Listening to the music, you know, because the School of Kyiv is an initiative which invites Europe to sit down and learn. Now this is exactly what we do here. We learn some completely forgotten theoretical background, which is the unity of music and mathematics in ancient Greece, which was of course chased by Christianity, and it was violently censored by medieval times. So it included this multiplicity, diversity, and all this that is missing in the contemporary political structure. And the moment of modulation, actually, when one note that is common to 2 different tunes is plucked by the player, you can actually, as an ancient Greek person, hear that at this moment, because you are listening to this note, modulation could happen. And exactly after this moment, so you anticipated the tone, right? You anticipate and then you hear it and you know immediately whether modulation has happened or not, whether the tune has changed into the next, into the other or not. This kind of intellectual listening, this was the form of joy that they had. But otherwise this musical compositions called payan, they were used in religious, polytheistic, paganistic rituals, and they have been procession songs. So there were always some occasions, for example, funerals or marches because of the revolutions or wars, or so they've been used for healing also. They are based on the physical. That's what I really like about it. For me, that's exactly the point. This is how philosophy, mathematics, music, art, geometry correspond with each other in one. They are physical frequencies of 1 to 2, which is the octave, 2 to 3, which is quinta, 3 to 4, which is quart, and 4 to 5 is the third, and so on. And it goes on up to 32 of 45, which is the third. You will hear it on lira. I replaced them with the faces of the cats, so you could understand the character of the ancient Greek music much better. And all the tunes now are differentiated by the mathematical operation animals, which I developed in order to show how different these proportions of these 7 different tunes are. They are inevitable Mixolydian square root eagle, all embracing Dorian sum cat in form of sign. You can see the mathematical operation signs in them, right? The depressive Lydian minus dog, the self-continent Hypodorian plus fighting fish, addition fighting fish, the euphoric Phrygian multiplication octopus, the hypophrygian chauvinistic integral swan, and the cathartic hypolydian division turtles. So they are differentiated by the different tones that were used in particular modes, and so you have actually seen these lines. They are the pitches, the tone pitches. No. In contrast to the competing schools of sculpture, all manipulating their proportional data for the propaganda of the anthropocentric ideal of beauty, the mathematical operation animals don't represent or illustrate, but exist, as you will see, on rhythm, dance and melody. Ligo de lotos vremon, aiolo melesinon dan krekei, Chryse oda divron, kitarisim noisinana melpetai. So, and in honor of Nikita, can you tell me please the name of the author of the sculpture which is there? You introduced the artist. You introduced the artist to me another day. The sculpture here. Come on, the girl's name. She was there.
Oh no, Anna Svetničeva.
Yes.
Yeah. This artist I know.
Yes, in her honor, I'm showing this sculpture to create some correspondence with the space, because these are dogs and turtles from this notation, right? It's a 3 meters wide sculpture that embodies the structure of modulation of the second Delphic hymn. You will hear it later on, so it's kind of connected with that space already, and we are already moving there. So this is actually what Academia says. Academia says all 2,500 years of knowledge were crap. European civilization is based on crap. sculptures. Sculptures, have been only representing, they missed the dimension of the dynamics. So the dynamics was missing, the character was missing, they were all imprisoned in the problem of representation, of course. And now with the temporal domain and with the simulation technologies, we overcome this. That's why we always go to the real, factual spaces. But that's not, the pre-Socratics we talk about, it's definitely not the second beginning that was the main aim of Heidegger. Because, as Edward Said said, the political subject of today is a migrant, it's a refugee, and Europe is not to be found somewhere in Greece or in any other Winkelmannian or Schliemannnian paradigm. It is a cross of cultures, and it has always been a cross of cultures, so whatever interpretations have been imposed on Greece until now, it was by the forces of empire we're still living. And so we want to overcome these forces of empire that extract and decimate all the differences and reduces this understanding of harmony to the politics of harmonization, which comes from Brussels. This is when a farmer has to pay 200,000 or 300,000 euros in order to plant herbal medicine on his plant. This is the harmonization of the countries of the European Union in the style of creating the United States of Europe or creating the totalitarian state of Russia. So I think that this is a musical system that can be seen as the political a priori of Europe, with very small cultures that are connected and that don't aspire to fuse into each other. But at the end, it's also could be a quite nice model also for Russia, because, and that's why I think that the activists until now have not managed to change the situation in Russia. It's because nobody actually would like to lose the sovereignty, and due to patriotism, activists don't see that the country has to actually be finally split in many different small cultures, and that would be a solution. So it's not only the model for Europe, it's also a model for any coexistence of different characters and in respect and timeless amusement. So please, let's go to the hymns. So the culture that has lost its relation to tragedy is degrading. I think I'm mixing two quotes, one by Adorno and the other one by somebody who was talking about the ancient Greek tragedy as something that would still have the necessary plural. This necessary plural is something opposed to the idea of monotheisms. And these different tunes would enable composers use them to differentiate different characters in the ancient Greek tragedy. This is the oldest fragment by Euripides from Orestes. Sorry people, I'm a sculptor. I actually have nothing to do with music, so don't expect.
Mater os
So it's a short fragment, very depressive. And now you will be listening to the so-called second Delphic hymn to Apollon, composed by Limenios in 2250 years ago, according to the state of today's research, and it has been encoded in the 60s of the last century, thanks to the scientists who have managed to understand that the letters of the ancient Greek alphabet have been turned 90 degrees or 180 degrees, and it was instrumental notation. So only the instrumental, a certain part of documents where they have been turned, and the vocal was not turned. So they understood that it might be due to the necessity to tune it just a tiny bit higher for the next part of the song after the modulation, just to change them a little bit. They wouldn't have their own letter to signify the particular interval that changes slightly, just by 1/4 or something. And only because of this physical movement that it also would involve moving the colopes, which were these small sticks that they had fixed the strings with. You can see it on the ancient Greek vases, that it would be the physical movement. And this is what I love about ancient Greek philosophy and its being related to the world, that it has actually shown the physicality of the movement that one would do to tune the lyra. But I have 12 strings, so I don't have to retune anything. But it includes 2 different modes. It's hypolydian and Lydian. So according to the cat notation, it's depressive Lydian minus dogs and cathartic hypolydian division turtles participating in this hymn. And some of it I just leave pure according to the melody, so you don't listen to all this decoration, so you can follow the melody itself. diachem petrokatiki sacho bayani bayan odegega thotino dexamenos ambrotan theos espechnon frenans oneginas aparchas theionakiklisko menapas laos avtochtonon Side vacumeras firsos plixes mosieros technitone noikos poleike cropiai. No, I'm not waiting for applause. It's also not a performance. It's a demonstration. As I told you, if the activists in Russia would not be patriotic, they would separate all different parts of the empire into small different, provinces, which would coexist not as Russia. And so this problem would have been solved. So this has nothing to do with expecting some, it's not an entertainment program. It's for the listeners to understand and to inhale this political model. And so this song is going to be dedicated to Ivan Tarasyuk. People like, Nikita, who is this? One day I was passing these memorials with flowers and photos on Maidan Square, and some of the photos were thrown down to the ground, and some candles also. And I'm here in Kyiv, I'm supposed to create some kind of relation to this place, right? So I live on this Maidan Square, and my only experience with this is actually to pick up these photos, to put them back, and to put back these candles. And so when I put back the last candle, I also decided to look at the photo, and it was a photo of a guy who was showing this to me, personally. This was my personal experience, he's not dead. All these people who died for freedom and dignity are not dead, and this song is in his honor. It's called Hymn to the Sun, and no need to explain that the sun codifies, revolution in some historical moments in time. Then
Glавка de Paris Selana Chrononoriona Gemonevi Levkoni Posirma Simoschon Galitele Desinos Evmenis Polimona Cosmon Elison. This was a modulation point between different movements. And so now Greece and Ukraine are Argentina and Venezuela of Europe. And the last song is a contemporary hymn, so we need the new revolutionary songs. And as we were talking about it before, according to Edward Said, the contemporary political subject is the migrant. So I'm going to sing you a refugee song from Berlin. But I forgot. Do you really know how it feels to flee from a country seeking for security? Do you really know what it means to be a refugee in Germany? It means discrimination, segregation, fear of deportation, isolation, discrimination, isolation, fear of deportation, segregation. Hey, come a little closer, 'cause I don't wanna fight alone. Hey, come a little closer, 'cause I don't wanna fight alone. No matter black or white, raise your fist and fight against this racist laws they've made to divide us. No matter black or white, raise your fist and fight against this racist laws. They've made to divide us, 'cause we are one, we are one, we are one. It doesn't matter where you are coming from, 'cause we are one, we are one, we are one. It doesn't matter where we are coming from. we are one, we are one. Come on, when will you finally join this song? 'Cause we are one, we are one, we are one. It doesn't matter where you are coming from. 'Cause we are one, we are one, we are one. It doesn't matter where we are coming from. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
Maybe I would ask, but I don't know. Maybe you will already discuss this.
You ask and we tell you.
Yeah, I'm interested in this sort of musical framework of those ancient Greek tones, because I have in mind this kind of solfeggio stuff, right? I can understand what is the way of structuring from of the music I know, but what is the logic of having, why this amount of the tones? Were they elaborated, and what are the titles referring to? Were they elaborated because of some tribes that were experiencing them, or so? Because as far as I understood, that each tone is somehow
exactly.
expressing some sensitivity.
Yeah, it's crazy what the scientists actually have to say about it, because.
But it's all reconstruction. It's not for sure, right? Still, I mean. To be precise,
yeah, you know, the problem is we discussed it a little bit, but to make it sound a little bit different, the only reliable thing is that, really the only reliable thing we can say about the ancient Greek music is that this here is a string, and if you divide it through two, it sounds nice, because it's in an octave. And this is represented by the mathematical division of 1 to 2 and by the figure of tetractys with 1 stone and 2 stones. That you can see the same division through 2 to 3 and so on. I mean, you know what I want to address. So this...
but it brings only the strings.
Yes, it's because it's a monochord. It's not even the other strings, it's only this. And it has been systematized by different musicological efforts. For example, Archytas of Tarent, which is the one who is likely to correspond with, you know, possibilities of thinking of this as a direction or political model, who has written the work called Logismos, trying to calculate equal distribution of wealth in the entire country. And Tarent, he systematized this codification of mathematical intervals with the letters of the ancient Greek alphabet. This was one person who at least delivered this, that we can now say this and this is an interval codified by alpha and beta. Thanks to these calculations, thanks to this at least systematization, we can combine this with the writings of Plato, who said, yes, if you hear this tone, this mode of music, it generally has an impact on the human mind. It's chilling down. All the others are... So these characteristics of tunes being somehow of that mood or that mood, they are not very reliable because it's just speculations of Plato, and there is no such, you know, you cannot like grasp it the way you can in the Tetractys case. So they say, yes, the Lydian is the sad, the Dorian is the brave for going to war. They say that the invention of the pycnon, which is the microtone, which is 1/3, which is the main characteristics of these enharmonic tunes we are now talking about, that this invention, it's totally anecdotic, so there are no reliable proofs, but it says that A friend of Sappho, Terpandros, he was playing Mixolydian mode because they were hanging out on the island of Lesbos, where the Mixolydian mode was played. And he left out some notes out of this Mixolydian mode. Then this Mixolydian mode was combined with the general Dorian scale, and this picnon, this third tone, came out of this combination. So it's only the fragments. And then, if it's provable or not, I guess we can prove it now. It sounds very primitive, but that's exactly what can be done. You can do the same examinations as the ones the Japanese scientists did with the water, with the molecules of water, which were listening to some music, and the heavy metal rock has caused structural water to totally distract, and then sometimes pop music has caused the waters to structure into snow. How do you call it?
Flake.
Flow. This can be done now. Physically, but according to the subjective perception, you can definitely listen to them all now, but you should not confuse them with the church tunes of music, which are called with the same names. So it's the false effort, the effort to somehow deform, distort them, that has been done by the church, and so that's why they are also having these other names. For example, the jazz musicians in the last century, they were saying that they composed something in the Dorian mode, but what they actually meant was the church Dorian mode. It doesn't include these microtones, for instance. I have not managed to follow. Sorry, you have another question?
To continue this logic to understand, and why the church is a social institution which became dominant at some period, right? Why was it so not interested in these peculiarities of this tone contained before? Because probably it's just somehow, maybe not a natural way, but just a logical way of ordering things. Maybe you could create like this gesture, this performance that was made by the church, like a sort of, I don't know, Apollonian gesture. Structuring on the surface what is like very chaotic, not precise, and just to have something like a formula to use later on.
The concept of this formula is what we're talking about here, and what Avtonomi Akadimia is talking about. It's the particular work which is a political program for the state, which is polytheia. The state is supposed to be ruled by elite. The disciplines have to be separated from each other. The state has to be military. The music, some music we have, but other music we don't have. We don't have all these artists. So it's written black and white, officially. The artists make disorder, they make chaos. They have to be chased away. This is why we come back to the garden now, 2,200 years later, because this is the greed that is the empire we're talking about, and what was the guy's name? The book presentation about Putin. Judah. Ben Judah was talking about the empire. Why was he talking about the empire? Which empire? Tony Negri's empire or the general empire? So the Christian empire and Roman empire, they have created this platform for occurrence of the matrix we still live in, and its logic is to subtract the differences, the othernesses, to decimate othernesses and to uniform. Very obvious. Same with music. I have not managed to force you to sing.
Not all people are able.
No, come on. One.
Very easy. One word. You can listen, you can learn. Well, Europe is sitting on a school bench. We can learn one ancient Greek song. It consists only from one word. Max, you don't understand? You understand? Troszki. How do you say? Let's sing in Ukrainian.
What is the word?
Anarchy, anarchia, anarchy, anarchia. It doesn't exclude possibilities of collaboration with institutions. Anarchy, anarchia, anarchy, anarchia. Come on! Maybe it's the structure of this meeting. We have to sit in an assembly. You don't trust me, huh?
I'm unable to do it even on manifestations with a big crowd, with no even music aspect in this. I'm just, I don't know, I'm paralyzed in this sense.
Yes, sorry, I don't know that. But what about you, girls? Come on. Anarchy. No.
Maybe it's the wrong word.
Let's see Ukrainian hymn. What is it called? Okay, when are you coming to Athens?
Tomorrow?
Tomorrow?
Not especially for Documenta, for sure. For some other reason.
Oh, great. For Avtonomi Akadimia, maybe.
Yeah.
Great! This was an official declaration of possible collaboration. The preliminary, the how do you call it in the bureaucratic language? Come on. Vasil, you know bureaucratic language. How? In prospect. Yes. No, we have an ever-growing list of professors, and some of them are real professors. Like there are some people who are professors at NYU, in Berlin, of course, and in Switzerland. And others started to use this professor title. For example, when they have to deliver their CV, they write that they have PhD in this and this, but they also professor at Avtonomi Akadimia because it sounds very serious, and so it sounds very serious. And today I received a letter, somebody asking me to write a letter of recommendation from this institution, so it's very empowering to now start, We will issue the student IDs very soon, so if you want student IDs, it gives you a tremendous discount, and it works very... So we don't have students from Ukraine, for example, yet, but we would like to have some. No, it's actually great also to visit all the archaeological sites for free when you come to Greece with the student ID. So how do you usually finish these lectures? By... Oh no!
Yeah, we can make it like in German,
We can just do this.
Oh, yes!
Finish with this.
Not that God come and turn off electricity.
No, it's very serious because, really serious. Because, previously I've mentioned how important for us the media theory is,
And what is media theory? It actually talks about the importance of the conditions of emergence of culture. So, for example, we are at the physical space of Avtonomi Akadimia garden because we want to rewrite this history. Or Romanticism writers in the 18th century have written that way or this way because they didn't have the typewriter yet. And since they had the typewriter, the writing has completely changed, which actually kind of blows your mind, which is a scandal because it questions all the individualities, all the subjectivities. So it endangers the bourgeois idea of autonomy of writers, of writing, the singularity of writers and so on. But, why am I saying this now? And the languages of Assemblea within the Occupy movement has been something like a new media, like a new type of scripturality delivered by the body, sign language that has been appropriated from the Spanish squares from M15 or Acampada. It has really horizontalized the communication. So it's now in the universities, I have been myself in the seminars which start in the morning by actually distracting the whole university structure. Like students come in and the first thing they do is very violent. They just put away all the tables and chairs, and it sounds like I didn't know anything about it. At 9 o'clock in the morning, they just start moving it away to the sides, and it sounds like bang, 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 like in the 60s, in the revolutions from the students. So they totally changed it, and they have this in this circular format. And the melodies of the ancient Greek hymns have emerged out of the musicians observing the movements of the dancers. So the melody has been actually composed, first of all, by improvisation, and this is why, actually, I'm starting to answer your question now, because that is the difference that has been then inscribed into the melodies, because the bodies were dancing differently, and nowadays still you have these hundreds of islands, and every single island has its own dance, and it's amazing because they are very difficult. They look very simple, but that's exactly the point. So the musician was watching them and improvising, and the word melodia itself, it means mele is its root. And mele are limbs of the body, and melodia, it's just a sequence of movements of parts of the body in time. Can you imagine? So you can find some kind of proofs. But
how can you dance without music?
In the language.
I mean, you say that musicians were observing those who were dancing, but they were dancing just in which way?
Well, I guess it was a little bit of a reciprocal process of song and dance, that there was both. But chorus is the dance, right? So even singing it in a choir, actually, melodia is physically in the language, both words origin from the human bodies, but the music instruments, I mean, I don't know if they were very elaborated, but that's how music started, right? It's just the rhythm, and I guess there was no such separation as we have it now. The consciousness itself was very different than now. Back then, we are talking about these practices of religion when people had acoustic hallucinations. This is very well described in the book of Joulia and James in the 70s, which was perceived as very esoteric, but now it constitutes the very background of all neurosciences, brain research. And he's writing about the origin of consciousness in the breakdown of the bicameral mind. The idea of state, it actually emerged. If we talk about when exactly it happened, it started when the people stopped to have acoustic hallucinations of the voices of the gods, for instance. So they had separated parts of the brain, and one part of the brain was hallucinating the voices of the gods, and the other part was perceiving it as a reality. And there is so much research about it, and this is like a schizophrenic state, which was normality. We have a lecturer who is working on that in Athens.
That's amazing.
And did Pythagoras and his followers were also, did they also were like indicating the music science with letters or with some other science? So was it a typical way of like writing the music?
Yes, that's why.
In letters.
Only yes, only this. Stoicheion. Actually, it's still unclear what was first and how writing really emerged. It's a whole, like Komar said in his lecture, it's an adventure of thought to think about it, how it actually emerged. There is a lot of criminological theories about it. I'm doing a book about it with the dead Hitler and Peter Weibel now. It's a long story, but to make this story short, the letters themselves were somehow also inspired by these same parts of the bodies eventually. The idea of a sequence or something that is differentiated by elements can be partly coming from what the Anglo-Saxon science tries to reject as pre-scientific wisdom, being 4 elements of Empedocles, for instance, like 4 elements, and thinking in this, atomistic approach of dividing everything and structuring everything. And that's how absolutely possible that alphabet has emerged. There are theories that suggest that alphabet no, not alphabet. There are theories that say that the ancient Greek music notation emerged because the Greeks were very proud of the beauty of their music, and they wanted to present this beauty to barbarian Romans. So they were like, look what we have. We have this absolutely crazy structure. And that's the only reason why they actually written down this structure. Because when they written it down, it was not to be able to follow the notes, the tones in time, but very pretentious, so to actually expose this. But it was very limiting also, because ancient Greek music notation is also stuck in the problem of representation, because the letters are not music themselves. The letters are only codifying the intervals, so you have to know how to read them, but with the help of the Pythagorean acousmata, which was written down by Philolaus, it's still possible. So, yeah, actually, they were writing it down with the letters. So it's called parasemantike techne, which is parasemantike techne, which is beyond.
Beyond signifier.
Exactly. So this is a different language.
But today in music also it's a common habit to indicate some tones on each of these letters. So how do you know that these letters and their grades and the way they were termed, they are indicating precisely the tone, or for example not the echo? It's just hard to say.
This you can see, because you see which mathematical intervals are codified by which letters. This is fixed. So when you have the melody, you can definitely play exactly these tones. And it's a grid which is very flexible. You can apply it for any pitch. So it's like a grid which can never change. These are the so-called reliable laws of the real artworks, as Friedrich Hölderlin called them, because they are so fixed. He was also calling them solid letter. The letter is solid because it actually embodies a particular interval, and there can be.
How many notes did they have? because I can assume that the structure is totally different, so we didn't have like octaves, which are like structural blocks, components for the whole row of the possible sound.
They had tetrachords and some notes that are close to these ends of tetrachords. So they had one octave with two tetrachords. Now I have to explain this thing without pictures. So it's this conjunct tetrachords which cannot exist because they don't fit into one octave. So that's why they displaced it like this. So between, this is mese, this is the center around which everything is built up, and this is paramese. So this is one tone, but otherwise this is how they correspond, and that is how they are basically built up. So they are built up not to have the number of equal distances between the notes, but they have this, and then here they have one more, and here they also have one more tetrachord, and around those they have little tones. But it results from the pure mathematical intervals. That was their main motivation. And the number of notes, I mean,
as many as letters.
yeah, I haven't counted them. There are a lot, yes.
But it means that they are not repeating in octaves. If you have tetrachord, it means that you always have a shift to the next stage. Right?
Yeah, exactly. That's how it's been, yeah, exactly. And then for each one there is a name, for example, the lower one. Or, like, for example, this would be called, for example, hypate. And then they would say next to hypate one, or something like this. So they would just explain their positions. And it was not, as we imagine it, this is high pitch, this is a low pitch, it was the opposite. So that was the low, it would go other way around. Nobody has done any electronic versions of this, for example, although it's very easy because you just type in the intervals into the supercollider and you get the tones, so you could do a lot of electronic stuff with it.
And was it like only specific to Greece or also this kind of structure?
You know, the good thing is we say no nations, no borders exactly because we really mean it. There was no Greek state. It started only with Plato.
At the
So
same time you are like emphasizing seven these tones or tonalities.
yeah,
So there are seven, but why not 12? Why not?
seven main ones. Not enough communication with other cultures. No, I mean they had. The thing itself was an influence of different cultures. So, for example, Pythagoras came with all his beautiful mathematics from Egypt. This is obvious because that's where it was developed. It was measured and calculated. But on the other hand, it's horrible because this is where the notion of borders itself emerged because of calculations of Earth, who it belongs to, and so on. But in any case, this melting point, so these different provinces which came together to the festivals, and so there was no Greece. So you always talk about Ionian, Corinthian. It's so poor in the optical sculptures or in architecture. You can still see some last traces of this. But this was, yes, it was invented in that area, not in Athens, but in the islands where Pythagoras was hanging out, yes. So, unfortunately, we have to say, even it might sound very Eurocentric, but if we are talking about this invention comes from that particular coordinates. You can kill me, but that's where it comes from. That's where they've been living physically, you know. You can go to the Sirens Islands nowadays and visit it, and that's what actually scientists did. They went to the islands to measure the actual acoustical frequencies of the situation, to find out whether the sirens were a matter of the real physical experience. So they went to the group of islands called Ligali, owned by some actor now, and they've measured the natural frequencies while they were passing by the islands with their ship, like Odysseus. And what they found out is that the rocks around the island might have served as acoustic amplifier, and according to their measurements, Odysseus could not have not heard the voices of the sirens. So actually the theory behind it was to deconstruct Adorno's belief that our culture comes from the neglecting of desire. That actually Odysseus stepped out on the islands of the sirens and visited the sirens and didn't, that was a Christian interpretation of something like this. So it's these geographical conditions that bring it up, and it's exactly the same when I see the documentations of Avtonomi Akadimia, because these photos and videos mean nothing really. You have to just be there at the actual space, the garden, and it preconditions the state of consciousness. But Greece. So if you think this is too Eurocentric, I can sing you Turkish song, Indian song in Punjabi language, Indian song in Konkani language, and Indian song in Hindi language, and Mari song I can sing also, or Japanese. But this is only if you think that this is too Eurocentric. This is something I don't agree with Kittler, because maybe at the end actually he is Eurocentric. And I'm basically saying it to you because I'm kind of saying it to myself, that at the end this is what it is, but maybe to my mind it's just a tiny bit only focused on this invention, and sees it as some kind of weapon in war against monotheisms. But I don't think that the war against monotheism is a nice solution. I think that the monotheists will marginalize themselves. It's like when you protest, protest against something, there is this, resistance movement. And while you are still protesting and resisting something else is emerging. And Avtonomi Akadimia is a little bit of, marginalizing, for example, educational system which is corrupted by the military-industrial complex, by having a new one, having a different one, actually doing something in it. And so defending it and owning it is a little bit of a problem. Like, this is our Occidental culture. We have the ancient Greek music notation. It's ours. Exactly, that's the point, because there was no copyright, there was no Greece, there was no ownership. There was just this tetractus and music and freedom and the timeless amusement of actually being able to transpose from mathematics into music and back and so on. Okay, thank you.